Okay. I'll just say, good morning, everyone. Thank you all for being here. And I would like to welcome Dr. Arpita. I'd like to welcome Dr. Arpita Joardar. I had a brief introduction about Dr. Arpita Joardar. Dr. Arpita is an associate professor at Charlton College of Business, University of Massachusetts Dartmouth. She received her PhD in international business with a management concentration from the University of South Carolina. She is a recipient of the Fulbright-Nehru Academic and Professional Excellence Award in 2023-2024. Dr. Arpita has also been nominated for several awards at prestigious conferences held by the Academy of Management, Academy of International Business, amongst others. Her research interests include cross-cultural group dynamics, foreignness issues, and international entrepreneurship. So we welcome you to IBS Hyderabad, Dr. Arpita. Dr. Arpita is here to talk about her academic journey, her scholarly academic journey, areas of research in IB, and I request you to take the floor forward. Thank you. We have our director, Professor Venugopal sir. So I'm going to request sir to hand over a token of appreciation.
Thank you, ma'am. Thanks for coming. Have a nice visit, all of you.
Thank you, Dr. Prerna, for that kind introduction. Good morning, everyone. And thanks a lot for inviting me here today and allowing me to share my thoughts on my experience. So I thought we can talk a little bit about building, a scholarly academic career. I do realize that when I'm using the term scholarly here, I'm kind of using it in a more general sense to include anyone who is interested in doing research, kind of publishing and that kind of a career. Irrespective of where you are in the stage of that path. But let me start by giving you a little bit of background about myself. Oh, what did I do? Thank you. So as Dr. Prerna said, I am an associate professor at University of Massachusetts Dartmouth, and my PhD is in international business from University of South Carolina. My area of research focused primarily on, when I was doing my PhD, it was focused more on cross-cultural group kind of phenomena, and I worked on the concepts of group acceptance. But subsequently, I kind of broadened my research scope, and I'll be talking about that in a few minutes. And I'm here in India for a few months as for my Fulbright-Nehru Academic and Professional Excellence project, which really focuses on international business and incorporating that in the curriculum in programs in India. In terms of my experience, so I've been teaching for almost 17, 18 years now. Don't like to give that away that easily, but there it is. I have taught courses in the bachelor's, master's, as well as PhD programs. We offer courses both in person and online format, and I have taught in both modalities. I have been serving as the MBA director of our university. Some of the courses I've taught include things like international business, advanced organization behavior, organizational change, cross-cultural management, and the cross-cultural management course, to be absolutely honest, it's one of my most favorite topics, fun topic. And I've taught that both as a visiting faculty in France and in India. In terms of my research experience or research interests, so as you can probably tell, my research interests are in the area of international business, and that is the common theme that underlies most of my work. But broadly speaking, it can be categorized into one of these four areas. First is in terms of cross-cultural research. So I'm really interested in studying, the dynamics between people interacting from different cultures. So like I said, when I did my PhD, for instance, I was interested in, okay, how do people from other cultures respond to someone from another culture coming in? And to be absolutely honest, some of it came from my experience as an international trying to, going to another country and trying to fit in and get accepted as I was trying to work my way through my, experience there. So a lot of the work that I have done on cross-cultural research focuses on cross-cultural groups. I've done a little bit on expatriate experience, where again, people are getting exposed to different cultures and trying to, see how they can perform their best in that setting. That's one area of research. Second is in the area of entrepreneurship. So that one, actually, my interest in entrepreneurship developed as a result of my collaboration with an entrepreneur scholar. And as we started talking about this field, it was more like, okay, entrepreneurship talks about these issues. And then I come from it, at it from the international perspective. And I'm like, okay, that is fine. But as an immigrant entrepreneur, for instance, what are the issues that you're experiencing? How do you navigate those challenges? How is it different from an entrepreneur who is operating in their own country environment? That's how it built that stream of research. And we kind of, came up with multiple papers along that line that lives on that. Third, I have been kind of getting a little bit into the macro level issues also. The first two areas where I talked about the cross-cultural research and entrepreneurship, they were relatively micro level research. They were focused on groups or individuals as entrepreneurs. However, subsequently, I started talking to some scholars in other areas of business, like maybe people in operations, who are kind of studying issues of sustainability in global supply chain. Okay, so, and that's where I kind of, started coming at it from the international perspective and tried to kind of build into that. I should know the reason why I have been able to contribute to all these very diverse sounding areas, because if you think about it, groups on one hand, and then we're talking about entrepreneurship and maybe macro level issues. The reason, what is common as far as my contribution is concerned, is that I am interested in the concept of foreignness. How many of you have heard of the liabilities of foreignness concept? Have you come across? Yeah. So you probably then know that it's really focused on what are the unique advantages or disadvantages that you experience as a foreign entity, right? So a lot of the liability of foreignness research, what they talk about, they come from the strategy perspective, and they talk about, okay, a multinational company, a foreign company, when it takes its business to another country, why is it at a competitive disadvantage as compared to its local counterpart? That research came from this concept which Heimer proposed initially in the 70s, which talked about costs of doing business abroad. Right? It says, okay, maybe there are incentives or preferences that the government gives to a local company, which puts them at an advantage over any foreign company competing against them. That was the original concept of liabilities of foreigners. In my research, I kind of take it down to the individual level. And what I argue is that, yes, companies may be experiencing these unique disadvantages, but they're not the only ones. People also experience that, right? So when you're a foreign international going to another country, right, you may be experiencing certain disadvantages because you're on a certain visa. Okay, your visa allows you to do certain job, but you cannot live there if you don't have a valid visa, or you cannot do certain things, right? Or you may not know as much about the country, which makes it more difficult for you to get the deals which local people can get. So that was the liabilities of foreignness at the individual level. Similarly, there can be benefits of foreignness. That because you're a foreigner there, you have the experience in your home culture, and you're taking that with you, which gives you an edge over your competitors there. That would be the flip side of it. So the common thing here was that, okay, whether we are talking about it in terms of a newcomer in a cross-cultural group setting, or an expatriate who is trying to adjust themselves in there, or we are talking about the supply chain network in a global setting, how does the liabilities of foreignness kind of play a role here? That was the common theme that ties all my research together. Okay. And then the last one, that's a little different one. That is a more recent interest that I have developed over the past few years. That is in the education of teaching business. So some of my work has been increasingly focused on how do we make the curricular, or from pedagogy point of view, how do we make it more effective when we are trying to teach our students. For instance, in teaching cross-cultural management, I had developed this simulation, cross-cultural simulation exercise. So if you think about it, we can all acknowledge that, yes, it is important to develop cross-cultural skills, right? It sounds easier said than done. I mean, we all know about it, but how do we behave when you're meeting someone from another culture? What is the right way to interact with them? How should we greet? What's the polite thing to do? What should we talk about? Should we get down to business and be efficient in our time management? Or should we first get to know the people, right? There are questions and there are expectations that everyone has, depending on where we grew up, what is valued in our culture. Each of us will respond to the situation differently, right? So it's like, okay, when we talk about this thing, it sounds so obvious, but it's not necessarily as easy to kind of realize when you're put in that situation. And for that, it's important that students who are interested in a career in international business, they're actually trained in that. So a simulation exercises can go a long way in helping achieve that, objective. So that was one of the things that I kind of worked on. Similarly, we have, like, at least in the US, we're seeing an increasing trend of online programs for MBAs and things like that. So it's like, okay, how do we make it more effective in that way so that we can teach this more effectively? So that is the other stream of research that kind of focuses on it. But the idea is to just kind of give you an idea of, how or what are some of the things that I am working on. Now, the question is, at the end of the day, it's safe to assume that most people who are interested in an academic career are kind of thinking of doing research and publishing it. And that is the assumption I'm going with here. And that's what I'll be focusing on in the conversation here today, right? So let me ask you this. When you choose a topic, what motivated you to choose a particular topic? Anyone? When you're thinking about doing a research, what has driven you to kind of maybe choose a topic or why did you choose that particular topic?
The first thing I saw while selecting my topic is the kind of work which has been done. And the second thing is that the kind of interest I can generate it for that particular topic. So if I can love a topic, I can pursue that topic for a very long time. So
it's what interests you, what you see as relevant and important.
What interests me is that whether I am motivated to look into or to delve deeper into that particular field. Am I interested with the intricacies of that particular industry, with the stakeholders of that particular industry? So these were the kind of certain elements which motivated me or which generated my interest for that particular topic. So that is how I approached my topic.
That's an excellent response. So basically start with something that you can build on, that you're actually interested in understanding, right? Okay, any other thoughts? Any other reason why you maybe decided to choose or?
And what you choose is not chosen by you. What you choose is chosen by few.
By few?
And those few make a difference to what they have chosen. Based on the future opportunities for what they have chosen. So your only risk is you bet on them. For example, I'll just give you an example. I'm not a researcher, but I'm an applied researcher of somebody's research. My friend is a researcher. So she gives me a research output. I monetize it. I don't do research, but I monetize her research. She doesn't know how to monetize it, just for example.
I get it.
Okay, don't think otherwise. So for example, ma'am, today, the reason why I'm attending here is a lot of people told me to do a PhD. Your areas of work are matching to mine. I'm from IFT Delhi, and I'm still a practicing consultant. And I don't have a PhD, and I wish to do it in US. Now, the topic which I want to do is AI for culture, for cross culture, AI in cross culture for China, and the market is US and funded by Iran.
Funded by Iran.
That's my title. I don't think any researcher would be working on these three variable factors, but I would like to do that. Maybe government of US may not allow, but I will do it. So, answering your question, so I see a huge opportunity for the only two countries which will dominate in whatever field is US and China, as per me. And AI is the one which will connect both of them. But there's a lot of cultural difference between US and China, huge. And India, every Indian says India has a chance. But I'm a true Indian. I won't say India has a chance. But India can fill the gaps where China and US have left the gaps. So from my perspective, the answer here is there are very few people whom I know, I can't tell here, who are working on this concept of what I told you. Now, I would like to do research on that.
So then what you're saying is you basically identified a gap. Which has not,
There's no gap.
because you're saying very few people are doing it.
Yeah, there's no gap. They're not doing because there's a gap. They're doing because they're going to create an opportunity. There's no opportunity. They're going to create an opportunity. Gap will come when there's an opportunity and nobody is filling that opportunity, or some are not filling that opportunity. But here, it's something innovative. I mean, nobody, AI in cross culture. I tried to read a lot of papers on AI in cross culture. I mean, how do you understand in a Palestinian mind in a US university today who is protesting? How do you understand?
So when you said you looked for that research, did you find a lot there?
No, I didn't.
And that is what we call a gap in the research. Okay, so when we try to look for an answer and we don't find it there, that means there is a potential to study something that has not been investigated. And that can also give you a good reason to go into the depth of it, right? So what you're kind of bringing up here are some of the, interesting ways or important ways of identifying the research topic, which is the first step. You all know you want to study something, but the question becomes, what do I study, right? What do I do my research on? Finding that right topic is very, very important. And what are some of the things you look at? Like you said, the area of interest can be one of the things that I'm really interested in this, and I want to see what has been done, or how do I go it? I want to kind of have a full in-depth understanding. Or what your point was, that I'm interested in AI and, see how the US and China will be kind of, approaching this, and I want to study that. That's your area of interest that you want to focus on. Another way you can identify a topic is based on your experience, which was maybe something that I did. It's like, okay, as an international here, these are some of the issues I faced, or these were the advantages I had as an international. How do I capitalize on it? Okay, what helped me? What didn't help me from, or maybe talk to other people. It doesn't have to be your own experience. If you work in the industry for a while, maybe you've seen some of the ways in which the organizations work. And say, look at it and think that this is how they're doing, but why are they doing it this way? The alternate option is a much more efficient way of approaching it. Let's study why that is not being, done. Why is it, so draw from your experience and find something that is relevant, something that can actually help the businesses going down the line. That would be an experience. And then sometimes it could be simply questions which have been raised in prior research. Okay, so that can also work. So for instance, when you study a lot of publications, you will find that they talk about, okay, we did all these things. This is what our findings say. But there were some limitations to our study, such as we could not look at this issue maybe from this perspective because we didn't have the data, or because we didn't look at this point of view, but this is something which is important and future research should study that. That opens up the door for another research potential. Think about it and see if that is a question that you're interested in answering, and if it seems important enough to you. If yes, then you can start building on that. Okay, so these are just, and again, this is not a comprehensive list, but it does give you some idea as to how you can go about building a research stream. Right? Then the second thing you may want to consider is, okay, this is what I would like to study. Now, is this a question that can actually be tested or not? And this is also very important. Sometimes we think of questions. I've had this conversation in the brainstorming phase. I talked to someone and we are like very excited. Yes, this is a really interesting question. We should do this research. And then we are like, okay, now how do we go about it? How will we test it? We need data. What data will actually measure these, these variables that we're talking about? If that cannot be measured, it's no good. It's not going to go anywhere, right? So if you're kind of proposing a question, it's important to ensure that it is actually something that can be tested, that can be evaluated. Otherwise, it's all very theoretical with not adequate practical potential to, make meaningful contribution. So think about that also. Because one of the challenges of cross-cultural topics, for instance, is okay, we are talking about culture, but how do we operationalize it? Now, nowadays, there are enough, studies, measures that actually capture this and that can evaluate culture. There are all these Hofstede's research, Schwartz, Trompener, all these scholars which have looked at it. But it's not always that straightforward in all topics. So think about the question, see if it is a question that can be tested to have any meaningful contribution down the line. And then, of course, the potential to make novel and meaningful contribution to research. How many of you have reviewed papers for journals or conference? Yeah. So you probably have seen that sometimes they will have a question about, is this making any meaningful contribution, right? Is this important? And that is extremely important to be able to answer. You can study whatever you want, but if you want to publish in a high quality journal, you need to convince them that this is something that is important, but has not been studied yet. And that is why you need to publish. So your paper should make that case. And that is something that is, it can be any type of contribution. It could be something, a new novel concept that you're introducing. It could be a methodological contribution that you're making. It could be the framework or the model that you've developed, maybe with multiple variables that have not been tested, together. It can be anything. But it's important to make sure that when the reader sees it, they see, yes, we had not thought about it, or no one had looked at it, and it needed to be studied. That is very important. So with these in mind, you can choose a topic that you think is worth investigating and go from. And the next step becomes the literature review. Okay. So now that you know your topic, the thing is that you have to have enough knowledge about the background of that area so that you can develop your model and your study. Right. So this is my question. Should you focus on prior research that can directly contribute to your theory building, or should you look at all prior work on the topic, even if not directly applicable to your study? And again, I'm talking about it specifically in the context of publication, not dissertation necessarily. So please keep that in mind, because there will be a slight difference in your approach. But here is my question to you. Let's say you're kind of studying a topic, something like, let's say, cross-cultural group. Does that mean when you put down your literature review, you should, in the paper, cite all the research in that area, or should you pick and choose? And if you pick and choose, how should you pick and choose what you put in that section? Thoughts on this? What do you think?
Obviously, pick and choose.
Pick and choose? Okay, what should you pick and choose?
Any kind of work that is relevant to what that is relevant, or that has given me a particular a step, like something on which I can build upon my work. So if that work is relevant to my work, then only I should cite that particular work.
So it's if it's directly relatable or connects to your
Directly or indirectly, or if I'm able to, gather something important, which I'm able to address in my paper. So that is, if there is something like, if a paper or if a work is able to, fulfill all these kind of criteria, then I'll cite that one.
fair enough. Anyone who feels differently or anything that you want to add to this? A different perspective?
Ma'am, my area is into immersive technology, and this technology, no doubt, it has been there from last 20 years, but now it has taken that, like last 4 years, it has taken that step, like everywhere the technology thing is kept coming. And obviously when this AI came up, like with AI, this thing is, everyone, this using VR headset is much easier because the programming can be done. So on that basis, in my case, it is coming because I have to apply a logic, why I have to go for last 4 years papers rather than last 20 years paper. Because if I am thinking of using intention to use for the consumers, then obviously coming, if intention, obviously in the last 4 years, what has been done and why it is going to take a place. So for me, it will be pick and choosing. It will go with the logic, which area we are choosing, and according to that area, what is the intention of a researcher, what he or she wants to go. So actually, it is, that decision should be taken by a researcher, actually, what he or she exactly wants for that research.
Fair point, because it depends on the topic, the currency, when you find the most relevant material. So let me share my thoughts on this. I see a slight difference in the lit review versus how you use the previous research in the rest of the paper, in the theory building section. Lit review, in my opinion, when the reviewers look at it, so again, keep in mind, when you're trying to publish a paper, the people that you really want to convince are definitely the reviewers and the editors, right, to make it through the process. Now, the purpose of literature review, the way I see it, is to kind of tell your reader, this is the background on it. This is the, basic thing which is out there already, to kind of catch them up to speed, right? Some of it may or may not be kind of directly relevant to what we're doing. Having said that, when you're doing doing a work on a particular topic, I would strongly suggest to be as exhaustive in going through the literature as much as possible, so that you have your bases covered. If a reviewer comes back to you and says that, why did you not make this particular argument? You should be able to say that I did not make this argument because this is what so-and-so, the prior research said, and this is not applicable in my view, right? And in order to make that argument, you need to know what the prior research said. So whether you put it in the paper or not, you should have a complete understanding of everything in that area that has been done in the past. You should be an expert in that area. But when you're putting down the literature review in the paper, you should kind of maybe cite or talk about the key origin of the theory. The classics, how we call about, okay, for instance, if you're looking at intention, talk about Eisen's theory of, planned behavior and intentions and those kind of things. If you're talking about, like my area, which is in the area of foreignness, talk about the Heer and Heimer's papers on foreignness. If you talk using social identity theory, talk about Tajfel and Turner and all these people, Hogan theory, who did the classic works on that. So those you should definitely address, so that the reader kind of understands what the theory is about. Whether that paper is directly relevant to your model or not, the literature review should touch on the key ones. In addition to that, currency, you mentioned that is an important point. Most of them will say, okay, but why haven't you looked at what has been done since this year if there is no paper in the last few years? So it needs to be updated, absolutely. So make sure you kind of show them that, okay, this is the original research, this is where it originated from. Since then, this is where it has come at this point. And in addition to that, like both of you mentioned, talk about the papers that kind of help make your case down the line. But that is a literature review. When you go on to the theoretical development section, then it should directly connect. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But so the point I'm trying to make here is, when you present or build your literature review, make sure you kind of go through all the material, but talk about in the paper, you don't need to put in everything, but you should talk about the main classics, which kind of help build up the theory. and kind of show where it's going, the current field, how it has developed. Then in terms of the theoretical framework, this is an extremely important section where you're kind of trying to say, okay, and again, this is the structure which you will see in most typical papers. It is possible that you take a different approach and then it may be a slightly different, but most of the academics papers, whether it's empirical or conceptual, they follow this format, right? So that's where I'm going. One of the first things you need to do is identify appropriate theory. I've seen a lot of papers when reviewing which don't have a theory. It just kind of picks on the variables, makes a case for the variables, but there is no underlying theory explaining the mechanism behind that. That is not a good way to go. I remember when I was a doctoral student, and one of the things one of my faculty said, and this was a methodology faculty, but he said this, that your theory needs to be very clear and strong. Because if that is not the case, then it will be extremely difficult to come back and make your case. Data, if it's not, you can still kind of fix it. You can still get data or run other analysis and do that. But if the theory doesn't work, it's going to really impact how you kind of present your case. So identifying the appropriate theory is extremely important. You should be able to say if variable A is affecting B, use the theory to say because this theory says so and so, and A is achieving this so and so outcome, that's why it will affect B. So make that connection, establish the link very, very clearly, applying the theory. So demonstrate the link between the constructs being examined using the appropriate theoretical framework. And that should be the case for any hypothesis that you're using. It shouldn't be that you have multiple hypotheses and the first one is explained using the theory, but there is no explanation for why the second hypothesis is developed. There is no connection. Whatever theory you're using for the second one, that needs to be demonstrated as well. Okay, so that is extremely important as well. So the overall proposed model should be grounded in theory. And this part becomes especially important when we are talking about conceptual paper. As it is, if you look at most journals, it's a lot more difficult for conceptual papers than empirical papers, because with empirical, the contribution is at least that, okay, the model has been tested, and this is what the results are saying. But in conceptual paper, you don't have a tested, result. What you're basically saying is, this is what I propose. It's all in theory, but it's important. So if you want to make that claim, it's especially important that you have this thing very strongly, supported by theory. Yeah. So I'm just kind of giving example of one of my research papers, which was published a few years back, to kind of illustrate what I'm trying to get at. And this was a paper which kind of looks at the expatriate career intention type of issue. So in that one, I was studying the factors that impact expatriate careers intention. So one of the things, is there anyone here in OB, international HR type of topic? Anyone interested in that? Sorry, that's my example is probably a little off. But here I was kind of trying to see if you have an expatriate, right? You want to kind of, they're immensely useful resources for companies because they have, traveled overseas, they've gone through the experience. If they have successfully completed, they will be even.
I'm there. You said anybody is there. I'm there.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you. Thank you.
I want to connect. That's the reason.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Wait.
So they have gone through the process. They have been trained in this cross-cultural experience, or whether they have been successful or failure. They learn a lot from the experience, right? Because they have been through the whole rigmarole. But a lot of the times when they come back home, organizations, they don't utilize these people fully, right? They don't have a place for them. They don't kind of fit in anywhere. Additionally, they may have had their own struggles overseas. I mean, when you're living in another country for 2 and 3 years, that's a lot different from visiting and traveling, right? You're not a tourist anymore. You're kind of trying to deal with the daily issues of working in a different culture, with different norms, different lifestyle. right? Find a house, do the grocery, figure out what to do about food, cook. It's not like, staying at a hotel and buying the food. So a lot of the times it takes a big toll on expatriates and their families too. If you have kids and the parents say, okay, we now need to move somewhere, the kids may not like it. They may want to stay in their familiar environment. The spouse may have to leave job. They may not like it. So there's a lot of adjustment issues that they have to deal with. So a lot of the times the expatriates, they don't want to go through that again if they don't have a positive experience. But if they are willing to go through that and take on another assignment after having learned from their first experience, then it's a major bonus for the company, because they have these people who have grown as individuals, who know what they're getting into and who are willing to do it again, right? So it's important to understand how can we convince these expatriates to kind of take on more assignments in future after having learned from their prior experience. So that's why we were trying to study the factors that impact expatriates' career intention. How can we, maximize the chances of them willing to take on future assignments? For that one, the focus of the study was the expatriates' intention to accept future assignment will be based on their perception of prior foreign assignment experience. If I'm sent for an assignment and I feel it was very difficult for me, right? If I feel that my co-workers or my employees in the subsidiary, they didn't respond to me well, or if I had too much difficulty, right? After coming home, I'm less likely to want to do that again, because I might lack the confidence that it was too difficult. I don't want to go through it again. However, if I feel that, I went there and I made a connection with the people there, they liked my contribution, they valued me, they welcomed me, then I may be excited by that opportunity that, yes, I did great, and I want to do it again because I feel a sense of accomplishment, right? So it's based on my perception of how I view the experience. Maybe I think I did great, but the other people don't think so. That's entirely possible. But my evaluation of the system will decide or will influence how I go ahead with my future decision. So this kind of actually draws from both learned behavior and expatriate adjustment literature. Those are the two theories I used to kind of develop my model. Eisen's theory of planned behavior, which kind of talks about, okay, what are the things, how do we, the factors that influence our intentions down the line. And the other one was the expatriate literature, which talks about all the different types of adjustments, work adjustment, living adjustment, all these kind of things that impact how an expatriate's experience is shaped. So based on that, this was the model that I had studied here. So it was the expatriate's intention to pursue future career. And the factors that we're looking or that influenced it are firstly task-based and expatriate's perception of task and relationship-based group acceptance. What that means when we talk about group acceptance is basically whether a group values me as an individual, as a member of it, right? So that can be based on both my task contribution or my relational ability. So task-based group acceptance means whether the group feels I am a valuable member that can contribute to the task or not, right? It is different from relationship-based group acceptance, which talks about whether the group values building relationships with me or not. And the two may be different. Maybe I'm a very difficult person to, hang out with. No one really likes me, but I get the job done. In that case, the task-based group acceptance will be there, but not relationship-based group acceptance. It may also happen the other way around, that I'm very easy to get along. I'm very agreeable, don't, upset anyone, but I don't get the job done. Right? So in that case, the task-based group acceptance may not be there, but relationship-based group acceptance is there. So it can be either or both, right? Or neither. So what we, in this paper, it was argued that the expatriate's perception of the task and relationship-based group acceptance, like whether I as an expatriate feel that the local employees valued my task abilities and building relationships with me or not, that will influence whether I want to again, pursue an expatriate career or not. If I feel that I was accepted, people valued me, then I'll be willing to take on that chance again. If not, I probably won't. Further, we argue that this relationship will be mediated by self-efficacy, where you kind of see that, okay, I feel I can take control of the situation. Higher the self-efficacy, the more likely it will have a positive impact on my intention to pursue the career. If I feel it's out of my control, there's nothing I can do, and people didn't like me, I'm less likely to be motivated to pursue that career. Right? In addition to that, the host country satisfaction will also impact the intention to pursue expatriate career. In other words, if I had a positive experience with a foreign country, if I was satisfied with it, if I felt it was easy to live, to navigate, get things done, the toughness was kind of not there, then I'm more likely to kind of be willing to take on an assignment. But if I have a very difficult time, if the living conditions was very difficult, if the infrastructure isn't quite what I'm used to, then I'll be more hesitant to put myself in a situation where I don't know what I'm getting in, right? So the higher the satisfaction level, it will have a stronger positive effect on expatriate career intention. So this was the model that we developed, and each of the relationships could be explained by the theory of planned behavior or based on expatriate literature. And that is what kind of I'm talking about, that makes sure it's all grounded in the theory. So, yes. Oh, okay, I'll kind of speed up a little bit. So this is basically what we were just talking about, explaining the model, which is talking about the different variables and so on and so forth. In terms of methodology, a few things to keep in mind is that, okay, this is, if you think about what type of study you're doing, if it's empirical study, qualitative study, quantitative study, what is appropriate for the type of research you're doing. Second important thing with this kind of research is the sample selection. That is extremely important. A lot of the times, reviewers come back arguing that, okay, you're studying this, but it doesn't make sense with the sample you have used because it doesn't give the full context of it. So for instance, if you're doing behavioral research and you conduct a study using student sample, because it's convenient, it's a lot easier to get data from students than from outside, right? Then the reviewers may say that's very good, but it doesn't tell how things happen in an organization because of these reasons that it doesn't apply. So make sure you choose the sample carefully, something that will still be able to kind of make your case to the reviewers. The scales that you use to measure, that is extremely important for all the variables, be it independent, dependent, and control variables. If you're using established scale, that makes your life a little easier because then you can argue that this has already been accepted by prior research, it has been published, so it has a certain level of legitimacy. If you're developing your new scale, then you should be able to kind of at least do some pre-test, maybe the scale purification process, show that it has a minimal level of reliability. Okay, so kind of, make sure address that issue if it's not an established scale to show that the measures that you're using are actually legitimate. The other thing with respect to methodology, especially with international businesses, maybe also think about the levels of analysis. If you're using or studying everything at the same level, it's easier. For instance, individuals' attitudes impacting their behavior, everything is at the individual level. Or firm level, variables impacting firm revenue, everything at the organization level. But when you are trying to study individuals impacting organization, you have multiple levels. One is at the individual level, the other is at the organizational level. Add to that maybe country environment impacting the relationship. There is a third level in play, right? Because now you're talking about individuals, organizations, and country. When you have these kind of multiple levels at play, it's important that you identify the appropriate analytical technique to make sure you've accounted for that in your analysis. Again, that's another issue that can become a problem when it comes to the reports. In terms of the discussion section, now all those are fine, but the discussion is extremely important. A lot of the times that is where it is kind of summing up everything that you've done as to what is the finding, what should people take away from your paper, right? When you talk about the discussion findings, it is very important that you kind of summarize the key findings. If your hypothesis that you proposed are supported, talk about that what it means. But it's equally important to talk about the hypotheses that are not found to be supported. Because remember, you're supposed to have developed the hypothesis based on theory. If the theory holds, then your hypothesis should have been supported. If it wasn't, then the question becomes, why not, right? And it's important to address that. I do not think it's necessarily a problem or impacting your findings or the merit of your paper just because your hypothesis was not supported. That's not the case. Sometimes it can actually be an interesting finding. It may be counterintuitive, which makes people think more. But addressing that, acknowledging it, and maybe offering some alternate explanation as to why it was not found to be supported, I think that can add a lot of value to your paper. Talk about the theoretical contributions and implications, both theoretical and practical implications of the study. Why was it important? How does this paper contribute to this stream of research? As well as, at the end of the day, we are talking about business, where we hope that this is something that the people in the organizations can utilize in some form or other, right? So that practical implication is very important to highlight and acknowledge. And of course, the limitations and directions for future study, especially if it's an empirical study. I don't think people will buy it if you present it as no limitations. We all know that methodologies will have some limitations. So kind of acknowledging that helps. You can preempt the reviewers. So for instance, let's say you have collected data from one country, right? So that is great, except that the findings may or may not be applicable to other countries. So you can make a case that, yes, it raises some generalizability concerns because we have the data from only one study. However, by doing that, we are also controlling for the country environment, right? So that way you're kind of preempting and saying it that, yes, I know you may bring up this issue, but we have thought of it. And while it does not address all the problems, it has this benefit. And you're kind of, covering or addressing it in advance, sort of. So, and maybe kind of build on that to say, but future studies may potentially look at this issue, which will give the direction for future studies. A few things very quickly. I know I'm kind of almost out of time, but I'll just wrap this up very quickly. Some things that you may want to keep in mind for publication, or the reasons why papers sometimes get rejected. One is that they don't choose the right journal. Okay, the scope of the journal kind of tells you that, okay, this paper will be fit for it or not. A lot of the times, papers get desk rejection, not necessarily because they're not good, but it just doesn't match what the journal is all about. So identifying that right journal is extremely important. Second reason why papers sometimes get rejected, they don't have a clear research objective. It's a study they're doing, that's great. But what is it they're studying? It's all over the place. That doesn't help. If you identify the research objective very clearly, in the introduction section, then moving forward, the reviewers know that, okay, this is what this paper is about. So that can be extremely helpful. Theoretical rigor. I cannot emphasize the theory issue enough, and I think I already kind of talked quite a bit about it. But it is important to keep in mind. Design of the study. Okay, whether it is, because the design of the study will determine the validity of the findings, whether it is actually kind of talking or testing the model that you propose, as well as the methodological rigor. That is challenging because getting data sometimes can be a big problem. It's not always easy. So you have to really think about, how do I address this issue and make sure that the study is actually rigorous enough. And then, of course, potential contribution. And that is, I think, one of the big things that, yes, you've studied all this, but why? Do we really care? Just because it has not been studied does not automatically mean it's publishable. So you have to make a case as to this has not been studied, but it needs to be studied in order for that to be something. I think the other factors that you may have to kind of think about is inability to illustrate the importance of the study. Think about, whether you were able to make that case in the paper or not, whether the study is addressing the stated objective or not. Like I mentioned, the research, stating the research objective is important. But if the rest of the paper does not address that, then it doesn't help. Because I've seen papers where it says, okay, this is what we're studying, but when they develop the model, it doesn't really have anything to do with it. That's a big red flag. Weak theory, any validity concerns, again, it ties into the theory development and methodological part. And the other one is the organization of the paper. Poorly written, poorly organized paper. They kind of frustrate reviewers and they lose patience very quickly. So it's very important to make sure it follows the structure, the standard structures of most journals, and go with that to kind of build up the. I know I'm kind of over time probably at this point, so I'm kind of going to stop here. If anyone has any question on the Fulbright project, because I didn't mention that, I have a little bit of it, but I can address that if there is any question. But thank you for being patient and letting me go through this. Questions?
We were going through preparation, for the sale and how.
For the Fulbright. So I might as well then, shall I just, to answer that, can I just go through very quickly? So, okay, so for the Fulbright, I'm talking specifically about the Fulbright program, right? For me, or for most of the US scholars, there's some things that we kind of, think about, like, okay, why are we doing it, right? Because it is a time-consuming process, I'll be honest about that. But so did that change? Can I? So, I mean, can you see that? Yeah, so basically the main reasons is that firstly, it has the potential for research and development, right? So they have Fulbright projects for teaching, for research, or a combination of that. So it is a very good opportunity if you want to build your research portfolio to maybe work in another country, get more data, or collaborate with scholars or researchers in other countries. It is also a big prestige thing for most US universities. But in addition to that, it's also an enriching experience because it gives you a chance to spend some time in another country, kind of, get immersed in that. So it's a, big thing to take away from that. Having said that, in terms of decision criteria, the things to keep in mind is, like for US Fulbright scholars, we have the opportunity to choose any country. There's a lot of them. So one of the things you may want, at least I considered, was the location. Where do I want to go, right? No problem. So for me personally, of course, I wanted to come to India. The award itself, what is its scope, what does it require, and if I can actually contribute to it or not, that fit is very important. And then it's also the, the duration of the project. So we have a maximum of 1 year, but it doesn't have to be 1 year. It's 4 months to 1 year, something like that. Now, I know it's a little bit different for Indian fellows. And so because this is what I was talking about was from the US fellows coming to India. But there are also opportunities for Indian scholars wanting to go to the US. So if you look at that, there are awards for students, academics, as well as professional development programs. So for instance, if there's a student who wants to go to the US for a certain period of time, maybe take some courses there or work with some researcher there are some options for that. Typically, the review process itself goes through multiple levels of review and multiple tiers. So for instance, for us, it was like, okay, there's a peer review, then it goes to the host country, then it goes to DC, where a board-appointed committee kind of makes the final decision. For Indian fellows also, it will be going to experts first, and then they will be recommending applicants. I understand there's a panel panel interviews the candidates before the selection for the Indian fellows. And in terms of timeline, I believe the announcements for the initial application usually starts sometime around April. And then I think May or July, sometime in summer, they have the deadline for that. And the final decision will probably come by the next spring. So it's a time, it kind of takes quite a bit because it goes through multiple stages. Having said that, if anyone does want to apply for it, I would suggest keeping a little bit of margin so that you can prepare your case as properly as possible. Look for the best fit. So for instance, if you have to choose a particular location, we'll be hosting it. Where do you want to go? Whether you're choosing an institution that can actually support or is interested in your research area or not. That is very important in my opinion. Otherwise, if you choose something and they're not doing anything in that, the chances of the application may be kind of lower, right? So think about that. Also think about the location where you're going, whether that is something that would work or not, especially if your family commitments like that. What's the time frame for which you'll be going? But as far as preparing the application is concerned, I would strongly suggest getting some feedback from others before the final submission. Because at least for me, I feel like I know what I'm trying to say, but I may not have communicated it as effectively in the writing, especially when people outside my field are reviewing it. So for instance, concepts that I'm so used to when I'm talking about it with my peers who are in my field, they may be totally unfamiliar when it's being reviewed by someone from a non-business background, right? So it helps to ask someone who is not in your area to take a look at it and see what they think, if it makes sense or not. And I would also suggest, if possible, to get some feedback from someone who has won that award before and get their input also, because they may have a better idea of how to position it or what the reviewers look for, just to kind of increase it. That would be my suggestion. I don't know if did that answer your question? Thank you so much. Questions?
So, on behalf of IBS Hyderabad, I thank Professor Arpita to have taken time here and share her valuable insights regarding the publication perspective, which is very important in today's academic area, and also sharing the some suggestions in terms of her experience in Fulbright-Nehru scholarship. Just to summarize, and that is something which I believe is this is what I have been noting down as the part of your lecture. So just certain important things which I think summarizes Professor's fellows. One is the basic structure of the research, right? Starts from the topic you choose till the time you show the discussion, and some important factors which are important for publication, which starts from the selection of the journal. So couple of important points that I actually pointed out, and which I believe is very, very important also, that one thing is, with your kind permission, it is important. A topic is important but have not been studied is more important than rather than something has not been studied and therefore it is important. So that is something which we need to understand, and when you are selecting a topic, I think that is a very critical point which one pointed out. The topic should be important, and then we need to look at whether it has been studied rather than the other way around. Because a lot of cases we have seen that because it has not been studied, it is important. Your process has to be rigorous. Theory, literature is something which is very important, should be exhaustive, should be, covering all the possible theories which are there, and perhaps, if I may summarize, and perhaps we may know what we know and versus what we don't know. So I think in order to understand what we don't know, we should understand what we know about the topic, and that's where literature review comes into the picture. Theoretical background is very important, where theory is with it. Because at the end of the day, what the underlying phenomena is the theoretical contribution, and therefore you should have a very strong understanding of what theories are. Where are you contributing? It could be one or more than one theories. That is very, very important. And the rigor in terms of methodology. That is something which is very, very critical as far as your selection and the robustness of the research work is concerned. And last but not the least, I think the important part was about the publication and the factors that are important. Which starts from the selection of the journal. Every time you get a test reject does not mean your work is bad. It may be that you are targeting a wrong outlet. So I think that is something which we need to be very careful with, rather than, and besides the work, the robustness of the study, the rigor that you have gone through in terms of your research. And I think ma'am, this is very important part in every case, and being most of the audience which are comprising of young researchers here, who are still going through their journey of PhD. I think these insights are very valuable for them to take forward and improve in terms of when they publish and build their academic career. So thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you for sharing your insights, and I thank you.
Arpita, maybe on your behalf, I'm going to offer your offer to everybody here. Ma'am works in the area of cross-cultural management quite a bit. So if anybody is interested in collaborating, please get in touch with Dr. Prerna. She will put you in touch and we can work together. I'm just making that offer on your behalf to everyone here.
Appreciate it. Absolutely. Thank you so much. Yeah, absolutely.
We'll probably share your email ID.
Sure. That's absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm just, with your kind permission, because they were interested, those who were online. So I'll share the people so that